We had a discussion before this podcast about responsibility of having a voice that people listen to, the responsibility of having a podcast. Do you ever worry, because this is always a worry of ours, if we bring someone on our show and we can't contend with their points, if they have something, if they're a really good rhetorician,
Yeah.
and we just, even if we have the facts, we can't relay them in such a way that trumps whatever rhetoric they can spew.
Yeah.
Is that a responsibility that we then owe to our viewer and the people around us to not bring that person
You have the
on?
responsibility to do the best you can, to get your orientation right, to do the best you can. It doesn't hurt people to see you, put back on your heels or struggling in the face of a particularly well-designed manipulative onslaught. That happens to everybody. I'm concerned about that. I have guests now and then, very rarely, because I pick my guests very carefully, but I've had guests that I regretted having, for example, because the conversation, I couldn't stop the conversation from degenerating into an argument. I'm not interested in the game of who's right. It's such a dull game. I quit playing that game like in 1986. It's like, you're right. Go have it your way, So I don't like conversations that degenerate into arguments, and the sort of situation that you're describing, where you have a guest that's particularly good with rhetorical flourishes, it can degenerate into an argument about who's right. Primate dominance, hierarchy maneuvering. It's dull. But, there's no reason that you have to do your podcast perfectly. You know what I mean? You want to be on the edge.
We like to think that we bear some sort of responsibility if we have someone on our channel that, in essence, whether or not we agree, we are platforming them. Or we are giving them...
I don't agree with that.
Well, my sense of that, my experience of that has been that if you do what you can to explore and investigate, and you're trying to maintain an orientation towards truth, that the audience will sort that out. You have to give... You're not in the business of protecting your audience, right? You're in the business of conducting your investigation and letting them come along for the ride. And you have to assume as a default that when people see, most of them, when the evidence is in front of them, many people can see. The ones that can't, well, if you're trying to educate people, you're trying to deal with that problem too. So you follow the golden thread, and you assume that if you lay out the truth, that the best that could happen happens. And you don't want to get to the point where you're pulling your punches or confining yourself. You can make some mistakes in your exploration, Otherwise, if you're not making some mistakes, you're probably not pushing hard enough. There's an optimal level of error too.
It is a relief to see what happens when you take not going to win the argument, going for truth and clarity to the nth degree, because I see you, which I assume to be, someone in pursuit of that, to be successful and loved, granted, not without its downfalls and shortcomings of
there aren't any real downfalls or shortcomings, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, if you looked at my life in the virtual sense, you'd think I was beset by enemies all the time. But first of all, it isn't obvious that the number of people who should object to you is zero, the optimal number. Like if I'm upsetting totalitarian fascists, it's like, okay, that's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. And also the disconnect between that online, let's say, and in my real life is absolutely staggering. Like I knock on wood, and I don't take this for granted, and I'm also careful about it, but all the interactions I have with people in my actual life are ridiculously positive. It's weird because wherever I go, and it's literally wherever I go, I'm surrounded by friends. And so that's a stunningly good deal. And there's noisy radicals who think they object to things I say. It's whatever. It's a pain. I mean, I'm being persecuted by my college in Canada. I guess the Supreme Court decision for that comes down this week, and I suspect they'll find against me and have me pay the court costs of the college. That's my guess. But, how do I feel about that? I don't know. Maybe it's an opportunity, right? Dragons guard treasure. Right. So if a dragon shows up, you might be thinking, treasure around here somewhere if I was smart enough to see it. And that's a good thing to know. That's a seriously good thing to know. It might be invariably true. It might even be true when it's really quite something quite monstrous and awful staring you in the face. So if they do find against me and the college moves me to re-education, which is the next step, I have no idea what will happen as a consequence of that. And in some ways I don't care, like in a detached way. It's like I'm not that thrilled about being a psychologist at the moment anyways, because my colleagues, by and large, have proved themselves to be contemptibly weak in the face of adversity. It's not really a club I'm that thrilled to be part of. I don't depend on my clinical license for my income, and they're not really going to be able to damage my reputation. So they could cost me some money, but whatever.
Yeah.
I can figure out a way to generate more money from what they're doing than they'll cost me.